Okay, the month of June is here. I have no idea how it got here. It seems like yesterday we were getting done with like Christmas break and that sort of thing, but it is June. So it's time for the monthly question and answer time. So these will go along with the free monthly gardening calendar at permaculturefx.com. So there's never any cost for that. That is free to use, to put on your phone, to download, print and hang up in your gardening shed or whatever. The questions that I'll be going over today come from our Patreon members. So again, if you are on Patreon, thank you so much for your monthly support, for your continued questions, for your engagement, and for everything you're doing to better your yard and your property, your homestead, and the little plot of soil that you have on planet Earth. So it's always fun to jump into these questions. So before I do, I want to hit on 3 things for each of the major growing zones that I would be doing right now in my garden. So if you only have time this month to literally do 3 things. If you're in USDA zones 3 through 8, I'll give you yours. If you're in USDA zones 9 through 11, we'll talk about yours. Now, why do I divide those up into those categories? Now, practically speaking, even USDA Zone 9. USDA Growing Zone 9 in California is very different than USDA Growing Zone 9 in Central Florida. So depending on where you live, definitely tap into your local resources. Find out those little nuances about your growing zone and your microclimate. But in general, when we look at zones 3 through 8 and zones 9 through 11, we can group together some major garden, food forest, agroforestry, pasture or livestock management things that are going to be true all the way across the board, regardless of the nuances of your individual growing zone. So if you're in USDA zones 3 through 8, the 3 things that I would be doing right now, number 1, adding in your bone meal. So bone meal is going to be really high in phosphorus levels, which are going to help with your flowering. Vala wants to come up and say hi real quick. She actually just wants her dinner and she knows that it's time and she's not going to be getting it yet. So I'll just hold her for a second and we'll see how this goes. So bone meal application is going to give you that phosphorus level, which is going to be really good for flower set and for fruit set. So all the things that are happening in June, you got those little baby fruits, you want to strengthen them, allow them to be able to really set and really form to the best of their ability. And that's what bone meal is going to be able to give you. Now, you can practically any month during the growing season in USDA zones 3 through 8, you can absolutely be applying a very thin layer of compost. It's kind of like micro dosing your soil, and that has massive benefit. So if you're only going to add one soil amendment, I would say bone meal is going to be it. If you're going to do something else, I would add in compost. Honestly, compost, it's kind of like the magic fix-all in the gardening world. When people are like, oh, my plant is sick, oh, add compost. Oh, I've got this bug or insect problem. Just add compost. Make a healthier plant so that way it's more resistant to the bugs. You know, oh, my leaves are curling. Add compost. I have crap soil. Add compost. If in doubt, just add compost. So that's super easy to do. So second thing, or foliar sprays. So I typically use fish emulsion with sea kelp. My company of choice is the GS Plants. You can use Neptune's Harvest. There's lots of great companies for that fish emulsion and sea kelp. The fish emulsion is going to be really good for boosting nitrogen levels, greening up those leaves, helping the enzymatic activity. Kelp itself is not a fertilizer. It's actually going to help the plant absorb minerals and absorb nutrients better. So when you're applying that kelp as a foliar spray or even just as a powder on top of your soil, that's the real benefit that it's giving, is helping your plant absorb nutrients better. The third thing I'm using a lot in my foliar sprays is always probiotics. Pretty much every couple weeks during the growing season, I use the probiotic spray because honestly, the probiotics, it just prevents so many problems. It prevents bug issues. It prevents powdery mildew. It prevents sooty mold. I mean, it really acts as a blanket strengthening agent, not only for the human body, but really for plant and soil life as well. So the third thing in USDA zones 3 through 8 that I'd be doing right now, Cover your soil. Who knows what the summer months are going to bring? So if in doubt, cover your soil. The two primary ways to do this would be either a living mulch or a dead mulch. And then I'll talk about two things in the dead mulch. Now, living mulches, you can use pretty much any kind of cover crop. I love doing beans, peas, or legumes, or a clover because that's adding nitrogen back into the soil. But if you're going to use a dead cover crop, a dead mulch, the two kind of camps would be straw and wood chips. When do you want to use either of those? Straw, your soft stem mulch, is going to be for soft stem plants. Wood chip mulch is going to be for your hard stem plants. So the reason why that is when wood chips biodegrade, when they compost in place, it's creating a fungally dominated soil structure that most fruit trees, berry bushes, and nut trees are going to prefer. Whereas when straw or hay is decomposing, that's creating a bacterially dominated soil structure that most annual vegetables, herbs, and soft stem plants are going to prefer. So general rule of thumb is if you have a soft stem plant, use a soft stem mulch. A hard stem plant, use a hard stem mulch. So that's the basic summary. So again, if you're in USDA zones 3 through 8, you're adding bone meal, you are doing foliar sprays, and you are covering your soil. Now, if you are in USDA zones 9 through 11, here's the 3 things that you could be or should be doing the first few weeks of the month especially. Now, I'm going to say this very carefully. Number 1, I would use bone meal as well, because that's really going to be helping your fruit set, both in the annual vegetable garden, but also on fruit trees and berry bushes. However, in a lot of climates, especially close to water, subtropical, if you're on the coastal areas, if you fertilize later in the month, it could encourage algae blooms. So I never recommend fertilizing toward the end of June or in July or August. You're really going to want to focus on the first week or 2 of June to be adding in that bone meal. So nothing after the first couple weeks of the month. The second thing that I would be doing in this kind of a climate is my compost teas and my foliar sprays. I'm not going to be adding a lot of compost right now. Hopefully that was done before earlier in the growing season. Primarily right now, I'm focusing on foliar sprays and really the compost teas, the worm casting teas, very, very light fertilization to allow my plants to really get established and embrace the rainy season, especially for those of us in Florida. Third thing I'd be doing this time of the month is planting beans, peas, and legumes and or your cover crops. So really it's not too late to be doing sun hemp. I love doing sun hemp in May, but if you didn't get it in, I would absolutely be doing sun hemp right now. So that's what I would be doing in USDA zones 9 through 11, bone meal application, compost teas and foliar sprays, and planting those beans, peas, and legumes. And I should say also, it's chop and drop time. As we go into rainy season, chop and drop once a month on a lot of those plants like your moringa, comfrey, Mexican sunflower, the cassia plants. I mean, I am really like hardcore chopping and dropping because during the rainy season, all of those things are decomposing at a much faster rate. So you're getting way more bang for your buck as far as that goes. So take a little sip of my tea. My cup was made by my friend Joshua, the Mind of the Leaf. You can find him on Etsy or on Instagram. So questions for the month. So I'm going to kind of go through these couple questions here. The first one is from Kelly. Can you turn the dewormer with Basic H into a drench for goats? So first of all, Basic H, it is a plant-based surfactant. There's a link for that on permaculturefx.com. You do need to get the one that is in the blue container, whether it's the 5-gallon bucket or the 30-gallon drum. That is the original formula. Now, the reason why this is used in deworming is as a plant-based surfactant, it breaks the surface area of like sludges, mucuses, that sort of thing. So originally there were like 1,000 uses for Basic H was the phrase that the company used. Now, what we found out in agriculture is that it's phenomenal for applying foliar sprays because it allows the leaves to soak in those nutrients better. And it's really good for using as a dewormer. Now, I will say this is an off-label use that the company doesn't recommend. But if you look at Joel Salatin, Salad Bar Beef, they're using Basic H as their organic dewormer because it's a plant-based surfactant. What's a surfactant? It's a fancy name for soap. Now, the reason why you cannot use something like a Castile soap is it's not concentrated enough. So if you're using that, it's literally going to be absorbed into the digestive tract and it's not going to do its job further down into the digestive tract, into the rumen, into the intestines of the animal where a lot of those worms and parasites are at. So adding a Castile soap is going to do you no good. So Basic H is very, very, very concentrated. So when I'm doing it with cattle, with horses, in a 100-gallon container of water, I'm using 1 to 1.5 cups of Basic H, and that's it. In a 700-gallon container, it's about 7 cups, 8 or 9 cups if you know you've got worms or parasites. Now, in goats or in chickens, in sheep, I'm going to use a much smaller amount, so about 1 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. And that needs to be their only access to water for a 24-hour period. If you know they have worms, I would safely do it for 36 hours, but no more. Now, once you're finished with that dewormer, it's very important to repopulate the microflora of the gut with good, healthy probiotics. So let me say that again. Use probiotics after Basic H because you are flushing that animal out. It's like the animal's getting diarrhea. I mean, to just say it flat out. So they're getting the runs. They're completely and totally flushed out. You want to repopulate that gut. So my personal preference is to use Bio Livestock on every animal on the farm. SCD Probiotics now has one specific for horses, for equine probiotics. So definitely want to use that on your horses. So yes, you can absolutely, Kelly, use that as a drench for your goats. I don't do it on the animal feed. I typically do it in the water. Since they have continued access to pond water, could a drench work? You'll have to limit their access to pond water. So you want to make sure that that is their only access to water for the day, whether it's fencing them off, leaving them in their pen for 24 hours or something like that. It can't be as harsh as dewormers. No, it's really not. Next question is, do you ever side dress trees in the food forest that are not blooming with chicken manure, shavings, or things like that from the chicken coop? Absolutely. Now, I never want to side dress plants that I'm eating the leaves. So if it's something like Barbados gooseberry that I'm eating the leaves, Suriname spinach, longevity spinach, Okinawa spinach, anything that I'm going to be eating the leaves, I'm not using poop on. So I'm using that as something that is on hard stem plants only if I'm applying it directly to the soil. I am never using cow manure, horse manure, or even really strong goat manure because it can be too high in the nitrates or ammonia levels. So it can have a risk of burning the soil, but in smaller amounts, it should be fine, especially chicken manure. The mixture coming out of our coop is high carbon material mixed with the manure. Kind of depends on if you're talking like wood shavings or sawdust that has a 500-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio in order for it to decompose. So I typically am not using wood shavings around fruit trees because it has such a high carbon to nitrogen ratio in order for it to decompose. I'm mainly going to be using straw around the base of the fruit trees. If you're doing it with your wood chips, it's okay. But again, it's going to take a lot longer to decompose. Is this the same for goats or goat pellets? Yes, it is the same for goats and goat pellets. So next question. Christy is asking, when is the best time to prune limes or citrus? They never seem to have a dormant season since they often grow or go from flower to fruit, flower to fruit. Honestly, as soon as it's done fruiting, prune it with citrus. So mainly the dormancy concept is for other fruit trees that are not going dormant. Now, if a tree does not go fully dormant, like a mango or an avocado. Those are ones that as soon as that variety is done fruiting and the least amount of sap is flowing after rainy season is over, that's when I want to be doing most of the pruning. But on citrus, as soon as they're done fruiting, go ahead and do your pruning on those. Another question from Christy: how do I get an eco-friendly handle on mosquitoes in an urban food forest? Pray. No, I mean, really, there's a lot of great things that you can do to really get a handle on mosquitoes. Now, the myth is that if you plant a bunch of citronella or lemongrass, that's going to be a mosquito repellent. The answer to that is kind of. If you're rubbing up against it and you're sitting right next to the plant and it's brushing up against you, against the tables, against the patio, against the lanai, yeah, then those plants are really going to work. But really, mosquitoes are not going to be repelled by lemongrass or citronella or highly scented herbs if you're not rubbing up against them or rubbing them directly on your skin. It's the terpenes and those oils, the natural oils that are in those plants, that's what's going to be repelling those mosquitoes. So if you really want mosquito control, the best thing to do is bring in natural predators. So like dragonflies, for example, which is what you're going to be doing like in a fish pond. Dragonflies are going to be eating between 30 and 70 mosquitoes a night. So really, really good mosquito control. Honest to God, the best mosquito control is bats. Now, the myth with bat houses is that if you put them up, you're running the risk of attracting bats to your property. They're going to get in your house. They're going to, they're not going to get in your house unless you've got a gaping hole on the side of your house. And if you do, stop putting up bat houses. Go fix the dang hole on the side of your house. You know what I mean? So I'm not worried putting up bat houses. I've never noticed putting up a bat house that there's more bats getting in my house, my shed, or my barn. Your house, shed, or barn should not have open access and holes. You should have vent covers on any of those holes anyway. So definitely, if you want the best mosquito control, you're focusing on natural predators, on the bats, on the dragonflies, even wild songbirds will eat certain number of bugs and mosquitoes. Putting up bird feeders, that sort of thing, that's a great place to start with those. Any other ideas? One other suggestion would be to control mosquitoes before they hatch. So make sure there's no open, stagnant water on your property. So in order for that mosquito larva to hatch and do its thing, the water needs to be still. They don't like high oxygen or moving water. So either one, put in pond features, flowing fountains, make sure that the water has a bubbler in it, or that there's some kind of a movement that's going on in those ponds. Practically, take buckets in the yard, turn them upside down. You don't want water filling up those buckets. That is going to be a breeding ground for those mosquitoes. So if you can't control them by predators, then try and control the mosquitoes before they begin to hatch. So the next question here is from Michelle. Are there any cover crops that we can plant after the rain that's coming right now in USDA Zone 10A? I would probably be doing sun hemp. Now, it's not going to get as big and tall as it could have if you would have planted it in May. But honestly, you're not going to get more bang for your buck right now, pretty much in any USDA growing zone, than sun hemp. I mean, that's really going to give you biomass. It's going to give you tons of green material above that when you till it in, it's going to build the organic matter, the humus in the soil, and it has a massive amount of nitrogen that it's fixing in the root system. So it's probably one of the highest. In other growing zones, 3 through 8, you could be doing clover. Red clover, crimson clover right now would be okay. But honestly, I'd probably still do sun hemp. I really love sun hemp. Really, really good. Next question is, can we do air layering this time of year? Yeah, I mean, you can air layer pretty much any time during the growing season. The big key right now is make sure it's not in direct sunlight if you're air layering. So if you're air layering, you want that to be in a more shaded area so it doesn't cook it and dry it out. If it's in dappled sun, you're going to have to open it up probably once a week a little bit and use like an empty syringe or like douse it with water really well to make sure your sphagnum moss or the soil that's in there stays really wet and moist. But yeah, I don't see any problem with with air layering right now. So I think those are all of our questions for this month for the list. So if you have any other additional questions that you've thought of, you're welcome to add those into the comments below here. We'll try and get back to those questions, and you are always welcome to answer questions. For those of you that are new, this is your first time seeing this video. Every month we put out a free monthly gardening to-do list, food forest to-do list. What do you want to be doing with your animals and your livestock? So these questions are ones that people had sparked from that list. So if you are interested in continual classes, workshops, PDF documents, growing in your permaculture journey, we have an ever-growing library in our Patreon account. So Patreon, you sign up for a monthly subscription. There's various tiers, and then you get access to the ever-growing library, and you can go back and binge watch those if you want. For the abundance tier right now, there is a free 7-day trial. So if you're thinking, hey, I want to kind of check it out, but I don't want the financial commitment, great, check it out. 7 days, binge watch it, and then just turn it off, when you're done. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Have fun. I will see you in the garden.